Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's so nice to see you here. It's been great to see how my channel has been growing over the past few months, and it's getting me very excited to make new videos. So if you're new here, I make all kinds of videos and tutorials related to fiber art, for example about punch needle and weaving. I've got all kinds of fun projects, so be sure to check out my other videos and don't forget to subscribe. It's for free, and if you click the notification bell, you will be notified every time I post a new video. Today I have a tutorial for you about this little cloud. I've been making this cloud for years now. The first one I designed in 2016. It was these two, and I had the idea of a baby nursery in mind because they are so lovely, soft and colorful, and I thought it would be a really lovely addition to a baby or a kid's room. But I've noticed over the years I've made many for many customers all over the world in custom colors and even custom sizes, and I've noticed that they are not only used for kids' rooms but also for their own bedroom or even for in the living room. So they will be a lovely addition to any home. Of course, I've got a kit to go with it. You can find the kits in my Etsy shop. I'll link it down below. And in the kit you'll find everything you need to get started. So you'll have the loom and the comb and the weaving needle, and of course all the lovely yarns available in different colorways. So you can choose whatever suits you. So let's get started, guys. Welcome, let's get started with the supplies. First we need warp string to warp the loom with. This is a cotton and it's a very thin thread, as you can see, and very strong. Then we need a white yarn. This is a cotton yarn, and we need some colored yarns like cotton or maybe some wool. Different colors. I use 5 different colors in this case. Then we need roving. This is beautiful merino roving, very soft and fluffy. And of course we need the loom and a comb, a weaving needle and some scissors. So we're going to start with warping the loom. For this we need our cotton warp string and the loom. At the bottom of the loom you'll find these slots. So we have different slots at the bottom, and we're going to start with the second slot from the left, and we're going to string our cotton with a simple double knot around the beam and into the second slot so that it's attached and the knot is nice and tight. Now we're going to make sure that our cotton string has a lot of slack, and then we're going to move our string up. We do this while holding a lot of tension on the string. This is very important. We need tension on our warp. So we're moving it to the top of our loom, and we're going to use the second slot here as well. So move her up and into the second slot at the top beam. Then we're going to move it around the third while holding the beam with your other hand and always keeping tension, don't forget. Now we're going back down, and this is important. We're going to warp this twice. So we're going to go into the same slot, the second slot again, like this. As you can see now, the first one is a straight warp string and the second one is going at an angle, and it's what we want. So in the second slot, hold the beam with your other hand, keep tension and move it around the third one, and then you get something like this. And you move the string back up, and now over here you are also going in the same slot as the last one. So in this case the third slot, and going over the previous warp string. Around the 4th slot, hold the beam, and while keeping tension at all times, move her down. And now we're going over the last warp string, this one. And as you can see, these strings are coming together here, and now this one is coming together here as well. Move her around, hold the beam, and as you can see, we get these kind of loops here, 2 loops right now next to each other. And now we're going back up, but we are running out of string, so we need to get more slack. So hold on to the string while you do this. Always keep the tension. Now we're going back up and into the previous slot, the same one, and over the last string. Hold the beam, go around and back down into the same slot as the last one. Hold the beam, go around and back up, and so on and on. And that's how you warp the string. So as you can see, you get these pairs of strings at each slot. And make sure that your warp looks like this at the bottom and at the top as well. Now let's fast forward this a little bit, and at the end we're going up the last slot. So we have the last 2 slots right here, and we're going around it, and then we are finishing it up right here. And here we come down, and we have 1 slot left on the side. This is going to remain empty, just like the one we left empty up there and at the bottom. So this is our last one. Now we're cutting her off with a tail. We need the tail to go around the beam and knot her off. And we do this like this. So we make sure we keep the tension, and then we go around the beam once and twice, and then we're going to make a double knot with the last warp string. So this one. Make a knot. Make sure you keep the tension. This is quite tricky and it might need some practice. And make the second knot. And that's it. Make sure it's nice and tight. And that's it. So this should feel like guitar strings. And as you can see, all the slots have been warped twice. And we do this to get a more dense count of threads. And then you can work with smaller yarn, and also the roving will stay in place better. So now we're going to start weaving. I'll give you a little crash course with all the basics you need to know for this project. And I'll use this colored yarn so you can see it better. And after this short explanation, we'll start with the real project. So I thread my weaving needle right here. And then I'm taking the other end. And from the side. So maybe 2, 4, 6, 8 from the side. Always from the side. I'm going to knot it right here around a string like this, and then the tail is going to be pushed to the back. If I were to knot it on this side, then I would have the tail right here, and it might be showing in the end of your piece. This way it's on the back. So now we're going to start weaving. So this one is attached, and it's attached to this one. And we're going to start by going to the left. And we're going to go under, over, under, all the way through. Do it gently, like this. Make sure you don't pull on this one too hard. So if you pull really hard, then the warp string is going to move out of place, and you don't want that. You want it to stay right where it is, so you don't pull too hard. And we're going to push it down a little bit, because we don't want this space to be too long, because then you will lose working space. So we need about an inch, I'd say, under here, because we have to finish the weaving by knotting the warp string, so we need this space, so don't forget to make it. And now we're going back to the other side. So the last time, right here, I went under this warp string. So now when I'm going back, I would want to go over it. So I'm going over and then under the next one. Because previously I went over this one, now I want to do the exact opposite. I'm going under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and just continue all the way back to the other side, like this. Over, under, over, under. And then when I reach the end, I'm going to pull it all the way through. Make sure that the thread doesn't go out. I'll maybe hold it like this and then pull it all the way through. So now we're making the base. When pulling it through, you have to be careful to hold it right here until it's all the way through and this line stays straight. So don't pull in it too hard, because then this will happen and this will mess up your entire weave. If you do this all the time, then you are going to end up with something like this. So we have to correct this, pull it back out, and make sure that all the things have space, like this. So hold it right here, and it's very important to make a wave like this, or two waves. So wave, wave. And now we're going to push this down like this. And we're going to try to make a straight line, as neat as we can do, like this. And we've woven our first row. And now we're going back. We're going to make about 3 rows. So last time, right here, I went under the last warp string. So this one went under the warp string. So now I'm going over the warp string. So over, under. Always do the exact opposite. So here I went over, now I'm going under. Over, under, and all the way. So if you miss one, if you're going like this and somehow you manage to make this mistake, so now I went over 2, then you can go back and do it again. Or if you notice it later that you made this kind of a mistake, then you just have to pull out everything and do it again. Like this. So you can always check when you're busy doing this, check if you made. So here I went over, now I'm going under, so I'm still on track. Okay, pull it all the way through. Hold this so that it doesn't go out. Put it down. So right now I'm going to make sure that this one is placed correctly, and I'm holding the string. So I know now that I can like this, and now this one is the right tension and I push it down. I do this, I make these waves because this thread has to go under and over all these warp strings, and that takes space. So we need a longer thread than just a row. And this way you can see that all my warp strings remain straight. So back to our project. We are using our white cotton string and we're cutting off a piece of about 80 centimeters, which is somewhere between 2 and 3 feet. We string our weaving needle and attach it to the warp strings as I showed you before. Make a double knot and push the tail to the back, and we're going to start weaving 3 rows. So I've started going to the right here, and as I've showed you this before, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Now that we have woven 3 rows, we're going to do something different. We're going to come up in the middle, as you can see here. It doesn't have to be exactly the middle. It's not important to be very precise at this point. And we're going to make a triangle shape. So now we're going back to the right. And when we come back to the middle again, we're going to end just a little shy of the middle. And we're going to continue this all the way to the top of the triangle, and I'll show you. So here I went up a few warp strings before the last one, and when I go back you can now see that a shape is going to emerge. And now I'm going to stop a little sooner and go back. And as you can see, this way you can make all kinds of shapes in your weavings, which is really quite nice. A nice skill to have. So when I almost reach the edge, like here, I'm going to cut her off and knot the end to the warp string. And this way it won't be able to move anymore and everything is nice and tight. And we're going to repeat the process on the other side, and we'll need a piece of about 60 centimeters for this, which is about 2 feet, maybe a little bit more. And we're going to knot the end on the middle warp string, the warp string to the left from the end of the other triangle, and then repeat the process exactly. And the shape of the triangle is really arbitrary, so I do this by feel, and I think a lot of my rectangles beneath the clouds are different in shape, and that's maybe why I also get different shapes in my clouds sometimes. So this is really not important to be exact at this point. As long as you get this kind of V shape in the middle, then it should be fine. And finally, it's time to start with our fringe, the rain of our cloud. For this, we're going to use these beautiful colors of yarn, 5 colors in total, and we're going to cut them up in pieces. We need 18 pieces of yarn of each color. And we're going to measure them using the loom, as you can see here. I warp every color 18 times around the loom, also over my thumb to get more control, and then I cut it off. And when you cut it off, please make sure that you do not cut any of the warp strings. So I cut them off gently. And then I take them off the loom and put them on the side. And I do this for every color. And there you have it, 5 colors ready to use. And now we're ready to make the raya knots. The raya knots will form the fringe. For each raya knot, I use 5 of the pieces of yarn, and I take a random collection of the colors. I do this by feel, and I just keep looking at what I have to make an even spread of colors. Let us first look at how I weave a few of these, and then we'll take a closer look and I'll explain exactly how I make these raya knots. Let me now explain to you up close how I make these raya knots. So I'm using just 1 string for this, so you can see it clearly. And for each raya knot we'll use 2 warp strings, and we'll place every raya knot next to each other every time using 2 warp strings. So you take the middle of the yarn and you put it over the 2 warp strings you want to weave on, like this. And then you pull up the right one first, and then you move the right tail around it and make it come up in between the 2 warp strings like this. Now you pull up the left warp string and do exactly the same. So take the left tail, move it around and pull it up. Now make sure the ends are even, pull it together and then down to the base. So for a raya knot you need the base. If you have an uneven tail like this, you can correct it by pulling up the knot like this and then pull on the left side in this case to make the left tail shorter, and then pull a little bit on the right, and when you are even, pull the 2 tails together and down to the base, and that's basically it. So now let's have a closer look. First we take 5 of the pieces of yarn and make sure they are all aligned, all the ends are aligned with each other. Then we take the first 2 warp strings that are free and we place the 5 strings over them. Then we go around the right warp string and around the left and make sure that the tails come up in the middle. then you make sure that the ends are even, and then you can pull it down and it sits on the base that you created before. Let's look at it again. We take the middle of our yarns in our hand and we go to the next 2 warp strings. The right tail will go under the right warp string and come up in between the 2. Then the left tail will go under the left warp string and will also go up in between the 2 warp strings. Make sure both tails are the same length, pull on it a little bit and then pull it down. This shows that you really need the base that we made before, because the raya knot is a very loose knot and it needs something to sit on. To lock in the raya knots, the fringe, we are going to weave a few rows of plain weave. We do this exactly the same as we wove the base. So we'll knot the cotton string to one of the warp strings with a double knot, and then we'll weave back and forth like we did before. Don't forget to make the waves and don't pull too hard on the cotton yarn. And be gentle. Make sure you do everything carefully and with intention. 3 rows should be enough to keep everything in place, and then cut it off and with a simple knot attach it to one of the warp strings and put the tail back. This is my favorite part. I love working with this beautiful material, merino roving. We don't need scissors for this, we just pull it apart. And then, as this is quite thick, we're going to split this in 2, just somewhere in the middle, pull on it like this, and you can easily split the entire length in half. And then we have 2 pieces we can work with. Each piece is about 80 centimeters long, a little over 2 feet. So we're going to attach it to one of the warp strings, also with just 1 knot. And we'll put the tail to the back. And then we'll just look at me weave for a little bit, and I'll show you in a more close up how I do this. This is a lovely material to work with. You can really mold it to how you want it to look, and it's super soft and fluffy. Let me now show you up close the 3 steps that I take to make this fluffy cloud. I start by making a knot around the warp string and pushing the tail back. Don't make the knot too tight, and this is the first knot that you make. And now I've got 3 moves that I make. So I've come up here. I always skip a few threads. So now I will skip 3 and go under the 4th thread like this. So make sure that you always take your whole piece of roving, not like this, because then it will start splitting. So you have to make sure that you push it through all the way and grab the whole thing. See, it starts splitting easily, so you have to be careful how you hold it. Now I'm going to make sure that I've got this. There's a little turn in here now. I can still put my finger under it. I'm just going to make sure that this looks nice. So this was the first move. Then I've got another move, and it is to make a little loop like this. Then I came up here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and go under it in this direction. So I'm basically pulling the whole thing. I've got my loop still here and I'm pulling it. Shape it a little bit. So that's my second move. So this one got a loop looking like this, and now I've got a loop looking like this. And this is how I get the nice movement in the cloud. And the third one is going with a loop on the bottom. Then taking 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe 5 in this case, because the loop's already here. So 5, going under, and also in this direction, and just pulling the loop like this. And now you can see this one is shaped or is going the other way. So I do this randomly. So now I might do this one again, and then I might do the bottom one. I don't really count the warp string, so just do it by eye. And now I'm going under it again, pulling it, making sure that everything is touched to the bottom. Then the last one, this is important. Until a certain point, I always go around the last one like this and go up. And this is because, yeah, you want to include this one, because otherwise it's going to be sticking out. And then I go under, push this one to the back like this. So that's how you do it. Now back to the cloud we were working on. Let's just look at me weave for a little bit and then I'll explain more. Because of the way we weave these fluffy puffs, we skip a lot of warp strings along the way, and we have the risk that some warp strings are not being used at all. And this will be a risk later on, because that means that warp string is not tightly secured. So in the middle of our cloud we're going to make a row of knots. So I just knotted a piece of yarn to the warp string, and now I'm going to make these kind of knots around every warp string I come across. So I make a loop on the left and I pull the yarn around the warp string and into the loop. I'll show you in a more close-up later on how I do this. So I make a loop on the left by holding it around my fingers. Then I take the yarn and move it around the warp string and make it pull up. So around, loop around the warp string, make it come up in the loop, and then pull it tightly. You can really pull on it this time, so you can make sure that all the knobs of the roving are tightly secured in this knot. So like this, you can really pull on it a little bit and push the knobs down, that's fine. And yeah, this can go on in a continuous movement all the way to the end. Make sure you don't forget to also include the last warp string, like this, and then weave the yarn back a little bit with your fingers and knot it to one of the warp strings, a few strings from the side, with a double simple knot like this. Now we continue with our fluffy roving and finish the top part of the cloud. And we do this using the 3 moves again, like I showed you before. So let's just look at me weave for a bit, and then I'll explain how I make the shape of the top part of the cloud. So you want to make the shape of a cloud. So right here I've got about 2 more rows to go, and I'm going to start not going all the way to the edge anymore, because we don't want to have a straight cloud, but we want it to be round a little bit. So you really have to look at the shape of your cloud. So I'm taking another piece and I have to fill up this area. So there I go, and I stop right here and start going to the right again. So this is how I make this round shape. Now you see me weave again, and I won't be going all the way to the right, but I'll stop right here. This is it. I like the shape I have right now. And now I can lock in this part in the same way we did before, with a piece of cotton yarn and making little knots on all the warp strings from left to right. So I've knotted my yarn to the 5th warp string from the left, and now I weave it back to the edge and end it on top of the last string, and now I can make my first knot like this. And then I'll move my way to the right, like I've done in the middle of the cloud as well, and make sure you get every warp string included. So guys, that's it. The weaving is done, and now it's time to take her off the loom and attach her to a dowel. But of course, first we have to finish the back. So we've got a few pieces of the cotton yarn and the merino roving sticking out. These are all the tails that we pushed back, and now we're going to weave those in. This is very simple. We just take a piece of the roving and we just push it back behind one of the warp strings, and make sure that you push it back gently. Let me show you closer up. So I just pull up a warp string like this and push it under it. Roving is very forgiving this way. It's quite easy to just weave it back in. Just take a few warp strings that are close to it and just push the entire tail in, and sometimes you can push it under a few warp strings even. All the cotton tails that we have are all knotted to the warp string, so we can just cut these off. But if you like, you could also just weave them under the warp strings as well. But I like cutting them off like this, because you won't be able to see them. They're all on the back, so don't worry too much about it. So this one is quite long, so I'm going to weave it in because it's at the top and we don't want anything sticking out at the top. So I'm weaving it in behind a few warp strings and then I'll cut it off like this. Make sure you've got everything. Check everything, because sometimes you can't really see something sticking out. And I've also got a piece of cotton on the right here. Yeah, I got it. Weave it in because it's at the top. And that's it. Pretty simple, right? When you finish everything, you finish the back and you make sure that everything is locked in at the top of the cloud. You can push the bottom base up a little bit. You could also do this with your comb, and then you can cut her off. I do this by cutting 2 strings at a time and then knotting these. Just a simple double knot will do. Make sure you make a double knot that is very tight before you cut off the tails, and make sure the knot is placed right at the bottom of the base. So when you finish knotting all the bottom warp strings, you can now take the cloud off the loom gently at the top. Make sure you don't pull too hard, because you may distort the shape of the cloud. So there's no longer tension on the warp strings, and you can see that on the back. They may look a little wobbly, but don't worry, because we secured the warp strings twice with the cotton yarn. Everything will stay in place as long as you don't pull on it too hard. So finally we're going to attach the dowel to the cloud. We're putting the cloud on her back like this, and we'll have a piece of thin wood. You can just find this in any hardware store. Now we're going to place the dowel on top of the cloud and make sure that all the warp strings are straightened towards you. These warp strings are loops, as we took them off the loom like this, and we're going to attach the dowel by simply taking 2 of these loops and making a double knot around the dowel. Make sure this is really tight. You can really use a little bit of force for this, and then cut off the tails. And what I do is I try to place the knot a little bit at the bottom of the dowel. This is to prevent it from being seen once you hang the cloud on the wall. The top of the cloud will stick out over the dowel, so the chance of this happening is very small, but you never know, so you really try to place the knot at the bottom. So now work your way across, every time using 2 of the loops, and string them all very tightly to the dowel. I attach a piece of the warp string to the dowel so that we can hang the cloud from this piece of string, and everything will look nice. I do this by wrapping it around the dowel a few times and then make a loop like this, and then go around on the other side. This is also to prevent the knots we just made around the dowel from slipping off from the side. So make it tight around the dowel a few times, and at the end just cut off the tails. So now for the last step, we're going to hang the cloud and comb out the fringe. At this stage, it's also possible to fluff up the cloud with your hands to make it in a shape that you really like. You don't have to be afraid, it's not very fragile, so you have to be careful, of course, but you can still move it quite a bit with your hands. And then at the bottom it looks a little messy right now, so we're going to cut the fringe and make it a round shape at the bottom. Make sure you have sharp scissors for this, so you get neat edges. And what I also like to do is make a few of the fringes in the middle shorter, like this, to get some dynamic movement in the fringe. I think it looks nice when you make it like this. And when you're satisfied, it's done. And now we're done, guys. Isn't she lovely? So guys, that was it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it and had fun. If you want to make your own, and don't forget, I have the kit. You can find it in my Etsy shop, and there you find everything you need to make your own little cloud. And if you liked it, then please leave a thumbs up. That would really help me, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!